Obama surprised fans on our new podcast by saying her pet peeve about her husband is that he's chronically late. For example, we're still waiting on him to admit he's from Kenya. And as for Barack's pet peeve about Michelle, he's mad that she keeps leaving the toilet seat up.
For 20 years, you had Obama and George W. Bush's Department of Justice go easy on this guy. They didn't fully investigate the case. They didn't show any curiosity about the case. And now Donald J. Trump is asking his Department of Justice to show full transparency. And somehow that's a criticism of Donald J. Trump.
Barack Obama was marketed as a once-in-a-generation leader, a visionary figure who promised to heal divisions, elevate discourse, and redefine American politics. But beneath the carefully crafted image stood a man who mastered presentation while quietly outsourcing substance to entrenched insiders. The glow of celebrity disguised the hollowness of real achievement, and the myth of transformation masked the dreary reality of preservation. His speeches soared, but his policy stalled, leaving behind disappointment wrapped in eloquence. When Greg Gutfeld and J.D. Vance stepped in, they ripped the glossy wrapping off that illusion, exposing Obama not as a revolutionary force, but as the establishment's smoothest and most effective salesman.
Fact: Obama's now a Republican.
Everyone knows that getting rid of the deficit will require some tough decisions. And that includes cutting back on billions of dollars in programs that a lot of people care about. But what should be easy is getting rid of the pointless waste and stupid spending that doesn't benefit anybody.
Senator Vance, in Pittsburgh on Thursday, former President Barack Obama admonished black men for being hesitant about voting for Kamala Harris. I was wondering if you could contrast your approach to hesitant voters and how you tried to earn them over.
You know, first of all, I don't believe, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, whether you agree with Donald Trump or disagree with him, I don't believe in hectoring.
His myth has always been treated like a relic of modern politics, sealed in glass, polished daily, and guarded by an adoring media that insisted he was more than just another politician. He wasn't just a president. He was the chosen one, the orator who could turn a campaign speech into scripture and a photo op into a cultural moment. But when Greg Gutfeld and J.D. Vance began dismantling the illusion, the glass casing cracked, and the supposed masterpiece inside suddenly looked far less impressive. What emerged wasn't a revolutionary leader but a carefully packaged product, a brand engineered for maximum adoration and minimum accountability.
Obama and George W. Bush. If you want to criticize the people who aren't showing full transparency, you ought to go after the administrations that went easy on Jeffrey Epstein, the administrations that concealed this case for 20 years, and the administrations that failed to show full transparency. Donald J. Trump, I'm telling you, he's got nothing to hide. His administration has got nothing to hide, and that's why.
Greg Gutfeld led the charge by mocking the very foundation of Obama's popularity, the obsession with his words. He compared Obama's speeches to a glossy luxury car commercial, polished, shiny, dripping with promises of a flawless ride. But once you drove it off the lot, reality set in. It rattled, squeaked, and left you stranded by the side of the road, waiting for help that never came. The cadence, the dramatic pauses, the faux humility, it was all stagecraft. Gutfeld shredded the myth that delivering lines with charisma somehow equaled statesmanship. To him, Obama wasn't the great communicator at all. He was the slick salesman, pitching a product America didn't need, then vanishing the moment it failed to deliver on even the most basic promises.
Yo, Kennedy, just watching that now, so that was 2011. Him and Trump are saying exactly the same thing, but he's not saying it as well. It's like he wasn't having fun with it.
But it's like, even the name of it, he was like, and we're going to call it the cost-cutting commission because Joe Biden is going to be in charge, and everyone knows you don't mess.
J.D. Vance picked up the thread and drove straight into the heart of Obama's so-called legacy. He reminded the audience that Obama's presidency was never about breaking from the establishment. It was about reinforcing and cementing it in place. The man who campaigned as a reformer, promising to shake the foundations of Washington, ended up becoming the establishment's most reliable pair of hands. Wall Street not only survived untouched, it thrived. Lobbyists didn't shrink, they flourished. And America's foreign wars didn't end, they metastasized into new regions under his watch. Vance didn't hold back from pointing out the cruel irony. The supposed outsider became the ultimate insider, soothing voters with soaring rhetoric while faithfully serving the same old interests. Hope and change didn't merely fizzle out. They were hollowed out, repackaged, and ultimately betrayed.
Persuading voters. Your support is not something I'm given or something I'm owed. It's something you got to go out there and work for. So one, I just don't like the tone of going in. I mean, look, the better question for Barack Obama or anybody to ask is not why black men. It's not how dare you not vote for Kamala Harris. It's maybe they're thinking about voting for Donald Trump because they're sick of being censored. They're sick of.
Gutfeld savored every second of exposing how the media enabled and protected Obama's illusion. He ridiculed the journalists who treated him less like a president and more like a teenage celebrity crush, swooning over his Spotify playlists, his basketball jump shot, even the cut of his tan suit. It wasn't reporting, it was worship masquerading as journalism. Every trivial detail was inflated into a supposed cultural milestone, shielding him from the scrutiny and accountability that every other leader routinely endured. According to Gutfeld, Obama was never carried by bold policy or groundbreaking achievements. He was carried by the press itself, who acted like unpaid interns running his personal PR campaign. The myth didn't thrive on substance. It thrived on constant adoration, relentless flattery, and carefully choreographed storytelling.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, if you listen to Obama and you look at these inorganic protests, they say you have to, have courage, rally, act, resist, but they don't. For what? What is the actual issue? When Trump owns every issue 80-20 by almost every metric, from the economy to crime to immigration, where are you? The high ground maneuver of common sense is relegated in.
In contrast, Vance stripped away the personal charm and zeroed in on the consequences. For ordinary Americans, Obama's presidency left far less to celebrate than the media narrative suggested. The much-touted recovery from the financial crisis overwhelmingly favored banks, corporate elites, and Wall Street insiders, while everyday families struggled for years just to rebuild stability. Jobs evaporated, wages stagnated, and entire communities, especially in the Midwest and Rust Belt, felt ignored and abandoned. Vance framed Obama as the president who turned his back on the very people he claimed to champion, substituting endless speeches about fairness for bold action that might have actually delivered it. The result was a legacy of growing disillusionment, a political vacuum that others were quick to exploit and rush to fill. Gutfeld doubled down on the hypocrisy of Obama's carefully cultivated image as a unifier. He mocked the notion that Obama was some great healer of divisions, pointing out that his tenure didn't soften tensions but deepen them by doing almost nothing meaningful to address them. Unity became a hollow buzzword, repeated endlessly in speeches and campaign slogans, but it never materialized in policy or practical governance. Gutfeld rose to the absurdity of pretending that soaring rhetoric alone was enough to glue a fractured nation back together, reducing the entire idea to little more than another line in a perfectly rehearsed script. In his telling, unity under Obama wasn't leadership, it was branding.
Give us an example of an invisible woman. Look, I hate to tell the Dems, you can't just assume that you can take us back, because that assumes that you can change your opinion of us. All of a sudden you're going to reject all the misandry and the trans hysteria and all those narratives that not only made fun of male values, but objectively normal values. You want men and women to be okay with women and women showering with men in locker rooms, or drag queens reading to kids at libraries. How do you change that if that's...
J.D. Vance tore into the foreign policy myth, reminding audiences that Obama's Nobel Peace Prize was awarded before he had actually done anything of substance, and his eventual record turned out to be the complete contradiction of that honor. Drone strikes, covert operations, regime changes, and waves of global instability became the unmistakable hallmarks of his foreign agenda. Vance highlighted how Obama was never the peace president he was marketed to be. He was instead just another polished manager of American power abroad, cloaking military aggression and geopolitical interference in flowery speeches about morality and responsibility. The illusion of restraint masked a legacy built on intervention, destabilization, and moral doublespeak that left regions fractured and civilians disillusioned. Gutfeld jumped back into the fray by shredding Obama's post-presidency reinvention as a globetrotting influencer. He ridiculed the Netflix deals, the best-selling memoirs, and the endless paid speeches with staggering price tags, painting Obama not as a dignified retired leader, but as a celebrity cashing in on the remnants of his brand. The man who once preached humility, sacrifice, and service now strutted across the international stage like a superstar, sipping cocktails with billionaires and mingling at elite galas while still lecturing ordinary people about fairness and sacrifice. To Gutfeld, Obama wasn't a statesman at all. He was a lifestyle brand, peddling inspiration and empty symbolism while pocketing millions behind the curtain.
Far left really responds to is power. The thing that they're actually going to be responsive to is the recognition that there are consequences on the other side. If they get off scot-free, if they're never investigated, if they're never prosecuted when they violated the law, then they're just going to come back and do the exact same thing again. And there are a few different ways, of course. So it's the big tech companies that were censoring conservatives. They've got to know that's not going to be allowed, and there are going to be consequences.
Vance added fuel to the fire by tying Obama's carefully polished celebrity persona directly to the larger betrayal. He argued that Obama's transformation into a member of the global elite wasn't a shocking post-presidency shift at all. It was the truth hiding in plain sight from the beginning. The image of the humble everyman, sleeves rolled up and speaking for the working class, was theater crafted for voters, while his real alliances were always with the wealthy, the powerful, and the entrenched establishment. Vance insisted that the disillusionment millions of Americans felt wasn't some unfortunate accident of history. It was the inevitable result of mistaking a brand for a leader, of putting faith in charisma instead of courage. Obama promised transformation, delivered continuity, and then cashed in on the myth he had so carefully constructed, turning it into a personal fortune and a ticket into elite society. Greg Gutfeld took particular delight in ripping apart the myth of Obama's intellect, another cornerstone of the legend. He mocked the media's obsession with presenting him as the smartest man in the room, pointing out that his reputation for brilliance came less from ideas and more from performance. Reading from a teleprompter with rhythm and gravitas doesn't make you a genius, Gutfeld sneered. It makes you a polished presenter. And the cracks showed whenever Obama was forced to step off script, when the magic thinned and the words stumbled. The so-called intellectual giant, in Gutfeld's framing, was little more than a polished actor with a good delivery, a man whose aura of brilliance was carefully staged rather than genuinely earned.
Ask Obama, okay, where do I apply this courage? What space do I park it in? Should I double down on trans dudes in women's sports? Should I back the attacks on ICE? Should I show courage on those things? No, it won't work. As for Mark Cuban, I don't know why he doesn't apply the same mentality that he uses on Shark Tank with Democrats, because that was what was great about Trump, is that,
He forced the point as J.D. Vance circled back to the crushing impact on America's working class, hammering home that Obama's presidency was one long exercise in leaving those communities behind. Manufacturing steadily declined, small towns collapsed into despair, and while elites toasted Obama as a cultural milestone, the very people who once believed in him discovered they had been sold a dream that was never meant for them. Vance painted Obama as the president of the elite, adored in Ivy League lecture halls and Hollywood fundraisers, but absent in the factories, farms, and neighborhoods that desperately needed real solutions. Together, they stripped away the glossy wrapping paper of speeches, symbolism, and relentless media worship, leaving only the cold reality behind. Barack Obama wasn't a revolutionary. He was a salesman, the most polished and persuasive of his era. His true legacy wasn't hope, change, or meaningful progress. It was proving that charisma can disguise mediocrity, that style can bury substance, and that millions can be convinced empty words are enough to transform a nation. By the end of their roast, Obama stood exposed, not as the figure history books once promised, but as a hollow brand, an illusion shattered beneath the weight of laughter, sarcasm, and brutal truth.
And of course, you've got to pay the lawfare back in kind. You've got to say to the Comeys and the Brennans of the world, of course, you got to follow the law. You can only prosecute people when they actually broke the law. But we know that a lot of people broke the law in the last administration, and they've got to face real justice, not just words, not just getting hauled before a committee in Capitol Hill. If people broke the law, they have to actually be prosecuted for it. Because I think that if they do that, if they know that the consequence for breaking the law is go to jail, then the next generation of Democrats, they're not going to be...
Gutfeld and Vance didn't just poke holes in the carefully crafted narrative, they shredded it completely, leaving behind the portrait not of a visionary leader, but of a man whose only real genius lay in selling illusions to a world desperate enough to believe in them. And once that illusion is shattered, it can never be rebuilt, no matter how much polish is applied. What made the demolition sting even more was that Gutfeld and Vance dismantled not just Obama's presidency, but the mythology that has hovered like a protective shield for more than a decade. For years, pundits and academics have worked overtime to burnish his reputation, turning even failures into carefully rebranded moments of noble struggle. Gutfeld mocked this revisionism mercilessly, pointing out how every shortcoming was spun into some kind of hidden brilliance or strategic sacrifice. If a policy collapsed, it was blamed on circumstances beyond his control. If promises went unfulfilled, the excuse was always obstruction, never lack of will. Vance piled on by exposing how Obama perfected the art of selective empathy. He spoke beautifully about suffering communities, but his compassion rarely translated into meaningful reforms or lasting relief. Cities plagued by poverty, violence, and despair remained stuck in the same cycles, even as Obama delivered soaring speeches about their resilience and dignity. The same man who could shed a tear at a podium seemed unable, or unwilling, to push through changes that might have truly improved lives on the ground. Vance framed this as the ultimate betrayal, the ability to feel everyone's pain rhetorically while leaving them to endure it in reality. Hope, in the end, became a performance, not a policy, a stage act that replaced substance.
I don't blame Obama. He doesn't care.
Right.
He just wants to be left alone, get high on the beach, wake up, go for a walk, pass out, do it every day until he dies. That's what I would do. Let's talk about the most important experience that one has. Do you ever, when you're sitting somewhere and you see somebody wave at you and you wave and then you realize they were waving at the person behind you?
Yeah.
What does that feel? You have a feeling. What does that feel? It's
Gutfeld sharpened the blade by comparing Obama's presidency to a slick advertising campaign. The slogans, hope, change, yes we can, were catchphrases more fitting for a sneaker commercial than for a political movement. And like most ad campaigns, the excitement faded once the product finally hit the shelves. People realized they hadn't bought revolution. They had bought continuity, wrapped in shinier packaging. Gutfeld savored the irony that the man who promised to elevate politics ended up reducing it to the level of branding exercises and hashtag activism. Americans who should have demanded real change settled instead for symbols and slogans. And when the symbolism inevitably failed to deliver, cynicism rushed in to take its place. Vance argued that this disillusionment wasn't just Obama's personal failure, it was a generational wound, breeding mistrust and shaping politics for years to come. He described Obama as the spark that lit the fire of discontent, not by challenging the system, but by shielding it long enough for people to finally realize how deeply they had been deceived.
I just want, when Jessica brings up polling, she never does the compared to what. That's what you do with numbers. You always have to compare it to something else. But you didn't. Because the Democrats are less popular than crabs on a nude beach. They're at 19%. That is historical low.
They're at 19%.
It's just, it is so bad that people, it's natural to be somewhat, disappointed in what any politician is doing, but they hate you. And then you bring up the criticism from the brosphere, the Andrew Schultz and Joe Rogan. Well, for the longest time, Never Trumpers and Democrats have been calling the MAGA movement a...
Kelly's earlier critiques of media worship found fresh fuel in Gutfeld's relentless mockery. He roasted the way late-night hosts fawned over Obama, treating him less like a president to be questioned and more like a celebrity cameo to be adored. Even his most mundane appearances were elevated into breathless headlines. Obama fills out a March Madness bracket. Obama picks his favorite songs of the summer. Obama dares to wear a tan suit. Gutfeld joked that if you believe the coverage, Obama's greatest achievements weren't in policy or governance, but in playlist curation and fashion choices. It was, he argued, The absurd elevation of a politician into a lifestyle brand, something America never needed, but the press couldn't resist selling. Meanwhile, as reporters obsessed over basketball games and celebrity endorsements, ordinary Americans faced stagnant wages, crushing healthcare costs, and dwindling opportunities. The spectacle of Obama's coolness became a smokescreen, blinding people to the reality that the system remained rigged against them. Vance described it as pure political misdirection, the equivalent of a magician waving one hand to dazzle the crowd while the other hand quietly picked their pockets. Obama didn't just rely on charisma, Vance argued. He weaponized it, transforming charm into camouflage and keeping people distracted while the status quo ground on untouched.
You know, the last point I want to make is, I got to say, and shocker, newsflash here, I've defended Kamala Harris once, I'm about to defend Barack Obama once. So set to the side the hectoring and the tone of Obama when he went in and talking about black voters, like whatever, obviously I just criticized.
Gutfeld's favorite punch came when he zeroed in on Obama's self-styled role as America's moral compass. He skewered the sanctimonious tone Obama so often adopted, those lofty sermons about civility, responsibility, and hope, delivered as if he were above the political fray. To Gutfeld, it was the height of hypocrisy. A man lecturing the public on accountability while presiding over Wall Street bailouts, endless wars, and expanded surveillance. Obama, in Gutfeld's framing, wasn't a moral leader at all. He was a smug preacher, demanding others rise above while he himself never lifted a hand to actually change the machinery he claimed to oppose. Vance drove the takedown to its most devastating conclusion, the legacy of emptiness. Strip away the glamour, the speeches, and the endless media worship, and there's shockingly little left to define Obama's presidency. No sweeping reforms that restructured the economy, no foreign policy breakthroughs that reshaped the world, no lasting victories that could withstand the test of time. What remained was an era remembered more for how it looked than for what it accomplished. Vance called it the Potemkin village of politics, a gleaming facade of greatness, propped up by appearances, concealing the hollow shell behind it.